Greetings, we'll cover a few details about John Dalton and his life in a succinct manner. Here is a short rundown of his early years, education, career, persona, notable works, accolades, legacy, and demise. An English scientist, physicist, and meteorologist, by the name of John Dalton. He is most recognized for his work on color blindness research and for introducing the atomic theory to chemistry. In several languages, color blindness is referred to as Daltonism, being named after him. Known as John Dalton, famous as for his work on color blindness and for introducing the atomic theory into chemistry. Born September 6, 1766, Eaglesfield, United Kingdom. Died July 17, 1844, Manchester, United Kingdom. Father, Joseph Dalton. Mother, Deborah Greenup. Siblings, Mary Dalton, Jonathan Dalton. Awards, Royal Medal. Nationality, British, English. Organization founded, University of Manchester, Institute of Science and Technology. Discoveries, inventions, atomic theory, law of multiple proportions, Dalton's law of partial pressures, Daltonism. John Dalton was born in the little community of Eaglesfield, in the English county of Cumberland, to Deborah Greenup, a well-to-do Quaker family, and Joseph Dalton, a meager weaver. His family belonged to the Christian movement known as the Quakers, whose philosophy was based on a passage from the New Testament. He assisted his older brother, Jonathan, in managing a Quaker school in Kenda, Cumbria, when he was 15 years old. He began keeping a meteorological journal in 1787, and during the course of his lifespan, over 57 years, he documented almost 20,000 weather observations. Around 1790, he intended to study law or medicine, but because he belonged to a group that opposed the Church of England, he was a dissenter and could not attend English universities. He relocated to Manchester in 1793, where he was hired as a mathematics and natural philosophy instructor at the New College, a dissenting institution that offered employment to educated religious outsiders. Elihu Robinson, a well-known Quaker and excellent meteorologist, who had a significant impact on fostering an interest in mathematics and meteorology in him, was someone he looked up to during his formative years. His first collection of writings on meteorological subjects, Meteorological Observations and Essays, which was based on his own set of observations, was released in 1793. The foundation for his subsequent discoveries was built in this work. One of his earliest works on how the eye perceives color was a paper titled Extraordinary Facts Relative to the Vision of Colors that he wrote in 1794. He delivered an oral presentation in 1800, called Experimental Essays, in which he discussed his research on gases and the nature and chemical composition of air in relation to atmospheric pressures. He discovered Dalton's law, an empirical law he developed relating to the gases. The same year he released his second work, Elements of English Grammar. In 1803, his research on the pressure of a mixture of gases led to the development of Dalton's law of partial pressures, which is still in use today. He developed a theory about thermal expansion and the heating and cooling reaction of gases in the early 1800s with regard to the expansion and compression of air. He published a chart on atomic weights in an article for the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society in 1803, which was one of the first atomic charts ever made at the time. He expanded on atomic theory and atomic weight in his work A New System of Chemical Philosophy, published in 1808. He introduced the idea of distinguishing various elements based on their atomic weights in this work. He elaborated on atomic theory and atomic weight in the book A New System of Chemical Philosophy, which he wrote in 1810. Dalton never wed and just had a small group of close friends. He led a simple and quiet personal life as a Quaker. Dalton resided in a room in the George Street, Manchester, home of the Reverend W. Johns, a well-known botanist, and his wife for the 26 years before his passing. Johns and Dalton passed away in the same year, 1844. The only breaks in Dalton's routine of instructing and laboratory work in Manchester came from yearly trips to the Lake District and sporadic trips to London. He took a brief visit to Paris in 1822, when he met many famous local scientists. He developed the Dalton law, usually referred to as Dalton's law of partial pressures, in 1801. Today, scuba divers utilize this theory to estimate pressures at various ocean depths and their impact on nitrogen and air concentrations. His name became linked with the word Daltonism, which he invented to describe color blindness. In his work titled Extraordinary Facts Relative to the Vision of Colors, with Observation, published in 1798, he went into more detail about this subject. He introduced the concept of the atomic theory, and was the first scientist to compile a table of atomic weights in his 1808 article, A New System of Chemical Philosophy. This idea served as the cornerstone for additional research in the field, and is still regarded as valid today. He was chosen to join the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society in 1794. He was chosen to serve as the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society's secretary in 1800, and in 1817 he was elected the organization's president. The Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society had a large collection of Dalton's writings, which was heavily damaged when it was bombed on December 24, 1940. It led Isaac Asimov to comment, "The records of John Dalton, which had been meticulously preserved for a century, were destroyed when Manchester was bombed in World War II. The dead are not the only ones murdered in conflict." The John Rylands Library houses the damaged papers. In the Royal Manchester Institution's lobby is a bust of Dalton, made by Chantry and funded by donations from the public. In 1877, Manchester Town Hall welcomed Chantry's sizable statue of Dalton, which was erected while Dalton was still living. In his lifetime, he is possibly the only scientist who received a statue. After arriving at the Manchester Royal Infirmary too late to cast Dalton's head and face, Swiss phrenologist and sculptor William Bally of Manchester created a cast of the inside of Dalton's skull and assist therein. Mr. Politi, whose arrival at the scene came before Bally's, made a cast of the head. In the heart of Manchester, Deansgate and Albert Square are connected by John Dalton Street. The Faculty of Science and Engineering at Manchester Metropolitan University is located in the John Dalton Building. A statue of Dalton, by William Theed, which was originally located in Piccadilly and relocated there in 1966, stands in front of it. The location of his laboratory, 36 George Street in Manchester, is commemorated by a blue plaque. The University of Manchester created the Dalton Prize for Natural History, 2 Dalton Chemical Scholarships, and 2 Dalton Mathematical Scholarships. Dalton Hall is the name of a residence hall. Only 12 times has the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society given out the Dalton Medal. After Dalton, a lunar crater was named. Daltonian is the French adjectival equivalent of colorblind, while daltonico-daltonica is the Spanish and Italian. Daltonism is a less well-known word for color blindness, and variations on this have persisted in popular usage in various languages. The Dalton Division and Dalton Transactions are the names of the inorganic division and academic magazine, respectively, of the Royal Society of Chemistry in the UK. Buildings at Quaker schools bear Dalton's name. One such building is the primary schoolhouse at Ackworth School. After having a mild stroke in 1837, and a second one in 1838, Dalton was no longer able to speak clearly, but was still able to conduct experiments. He suffered another stroke in May 1844, and on July 26, he recorded his final meteorological observation with a shaking hand. Dalton passed away after falling from his bed on July 27 in Manchester, according to his attendant. Dalton had a full honors civic funeral. For 4 days, his body was on display at Manchester Town Hall, where more than 40,000 people passed by his casket. The principal civic, business, and scientific organizations in the city were represented in the funeral procession. In Manchester's Ardwick Cemetery, he was laid to rest.